This episode of Free Mind Podcast is brought to you by Bioprotein Technology, the makers of BioPro Plus. BioPro Plus is a non-synthetic growth hormone alternative. Comes in a little vial. You take it under your tongue each morning. No needles or any messy stuff like that. Packed full of growth factors, all kinds of beneficial stuff. I've been taking it for months and my results have been awesome. Recovered from knee surgery, helped my libido, my energy levels, everything. I feel great. Can't recommend it enough. Bioproteintech.com. Use the code FREEMIND, FREEMIND, and get $30 off. I don't know if you remember, there was a Rogan bit like a while back. I can't remember which special it was on, but he talks about how he's surrounded by women because he has all daughters and his wife.
Right.
And it's like his manhood is a stack of marbles and they just take one every day.
That's so good.
It's 100% my life, bro.
That's so good. I was even thinking about it. This is so far probably one of the only podcasts I haven't been wearing like a jiu-jitsu tank top or shirt. And I'm like, it's cold. It got cold in Austin. And so I'm wearing this like goofy sweater, but this was the sweater that I was shooting with like Tim Kennedy and crew all weekend. So I feel like it has earned its man stripes, as you have. And look how insecure guys are as we have to talk about all of our man. It's like you have your daughter's toys. I'm wearing a comfortable sweater and I'm just like, I've tapped out people before.
It's so true, dude. It's hilarious how we try to justify those things like we even need to, but alas, that's the daily struggle of a man. But yeah, dude, I was really excited to talk to you. So before we jump in, if you could, I know there's a lot that you've done, a lot to your backstory, but if you could give like a brief little timeline of who you are, what led you to where you are today, and then there's a ton of stuff I want to talk about with you.
It's funny. I never know. This is the first podcast in a while where I've had to like introduce myself, and I never know. Does he want me to say the cool stuff or the tragic?
Whatever you want. Tragedy is beautiful. Comedy is beautiful. It's all beautiful.
Okay, because there's definitely there's a phase. I think I said this when I went on Bert Kreischer's podcast. There is a phase where, my intro was just standard comedy. Like, you've seen this guy on Conan. He's been compared to Bill Hicks and George Carlin. Then there was a phase where my intros were like, man, it's shocking he's still alive. My guy's been through a lot. We're glad we dragged him here. And now we're like somewhere in the middle where I finally owned and seen what good the negative has done. And all right, so let's try this new introduction. I've done stand-up comedy for 20 years. I've also done jiu-jitsu and MMA for 20 years. I've been lucky enough to be surrounded by mentors. That's the only reason I haven't killed myself, especially recently, so when I was doing comedy, it was Robin Williams, at this phase of my life, it's guys like Tim Kennedy. And, I have a podcast called Advice Not Taken where I try to talk about mental health and comedy, and this will tie into kind of the problems I've gone through. It is from a place of, hey man, I'm still in it with you. I think sometimes people tune into self-help podcasts. Like I remember like when I was like, okay, I got to better myself and look into self-help. And I started watching like Tony Robbins videos and I'm like, and they're fine. They're good. There's a lot of good information on there, but I'm like, is he giving this information from his $1 billion home? Like I will never be the host who's like, yeah, bro, you just like hop in your cryo chamber every morning and, have your people bring you a green juice. And I'm just like, yeah, I would love to have health insurance right now. And so I think, hearing advice from someone who can also say, hey man, I was really depressed yesterday, or I had suicidal ideation a month ago or whatever. Cause I have been through a lot. I've been through public shaming and people saying shit that's not true. I've gone through me not knowing what I was doing and being a selfish asshole and having like this affair that blew up 10 years ago. The reason it blew up is because I was also this very self-righteous, lefty who, instead of dealing with his own depression and his own relationships, would just blast people on Twitter and kind of think that, that was me doing good in the world, when in reality, I wasn't paying attention to anybody in real life. It was all very online. To now, at 40, having gone through all of that. And, it really was just this year that I started what I would say authentically serving, because again, this was on Bert's podcast. I remember Bert, after the whole affair thing, was like, dude, you're really lucky, man. You got a fresh start. Like, the only times I had fresh starts were when I started comedy or when I had kids. And I was like, cool, Bert, fuck you. Like, I don't want this fresh start. I don't want it to be because of scandal. I don't want it. Like, I feel so dumb and I feel so ashamed, and I feel, I didn't feel anything positive. And then, that was 8 years ago. And that whole 8 years, I thought the only lesson I was supposed to learn was like, don't cheat again, or don't get into a bad relationship, or, whatever. And, I did that. And so I was like, okay, I guess that was the fucking lesson. And now that I've finally been hanging around good men who not only do I want to emulate in a protector sense and on a fighter level, but as a dad, as a husband, the way they treat their employees, I'm just surrounded by these special forces guys. Because I'm around them, and honestly, like, finding God, all of this stuff, I was like, oh, the lesson I was supposed to learn, yeah, don't cheat, don't be like a shitbag, right? That's easy. But the lesson I was actually supposed to learn is that whole identity, that whole performing for adulation, that whole tweeting political things, not just to help people, but because I wanted a round of applause. All of that was fucking fake. It was all, none of it was real. And the things that I can do now that no one will see, talking to kids on the jiu-jitsu mat, or, handing out food downtown in Austin, shit like that. It's like, that service, that's what life's supposed to be. And even now, I don't know, that last part sounds like I know what I'm talking about. But to kind of sum this up, and the reason I like talking to guys like you, and I'm excited about this, is I'm at another crossroads where there's part of me that wants to stop comedy entirely and just focus on this. Or how can I don't know, am I strong enough, or do I even want it, to continue to be the man I want to be in this environment that's not really conducive to it? Tim says yes and goes, yeah, man, you go be the light there. And I go, I don't know. I don't know if I'm confident enough to do that, or do I even want that, or do I need a reset? So that's kind of the current where I'm at right now. Things are great. I'm much happier. But also handing out sandwiches don't pay the bills. And so I'm going to have to figure that out eventually. And I feel like I got like about a month or two to do that.
So you're not doing comedy right now?
I took yeah. So actually, I mean, comedy has been going the best it's ever been in Austin. I was playing Vulcan several times a week, sold out shows. I literally, and I'm a self-hating dude, haven't had one bad show since I've been in Austin. Was starting to open for Duncan Trussell, who I'm a huge fan of, and is going to be on the podcast eventually. But I really wanted to focus on, being around the sheepdog response guys and Jesus stuff, honestly. And until I get a big grip on exactly who I want to be, it's the same reason I'm saying no to relationships. I just said no to a relationship this weekend that I really thought was going to be the thing. Like, before anything happened, I said no, where it's like, I started to see my old patterns come out, and I was like, whoop, I'm not there yet. And so I want to be like, before I get into a relationship, before I go back to stand up, who the fuck do I want to be? What exactly is my purpose? And then I can go into that confidently, instead of needing a girl, which has been my entire life, to make me whole, needing the validation from comedy to make me whole. And that's nothing against comedy, and that's nothing against women. This is all a Jamie thing that I'm kind of working out, which, by the way, the old version of me would have been like, what the fuck are you doing? Well, at least like go have sex with her and like go do that one show and just don't do these other shows because they're on the other side of town. And so this is like a big thing for me to say no to anything that could involve feeling good or someone saying like, you're a good boy, you're a good boy, Jamie. And that's, you know, I mean, there's my trauma in a nutshell.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So first
I
off,
should have just said you've seen this next guy on Conan.
no, dude, I love it. It's great. Are you familiar with Gina Hyena by any chance? She's a stand-up in New York City. She's an up-and-coming stand-up. She's been on Kill Tony a few times. She's done this podcast a couple times. She's a friend of mine and just awesome chick, very attractive lady, and has chosen, like specifically chosen to be celibate for the past year because she's essentially working on herself. A lot of what a lot of what you just said really reminded me of my conversation with her. And
I'm the less hot version of your friend Gina.
I hate to break it to you, but you are a little less hot than her.
I'm a little less hot. It's this fucking sweater, dude. I knew it.
Yeah. But no, and she said almost the exact same thing. She was like, it's about finally valuing me. And instead of just giving myself to all these people to try and seek external validation, I'm valuing me now, and I'm not just handing it out frivolously. You know?
And you know, everyone listening to this show right now has heard that advice, and now they're hearing it again. And I've heard that advice. I mean, that's why my podcast is called Advice Not Taken, where it's like, I've heard it so many times, and you're just like, yeah, love yourself before you fucking, I get it. Right. And this is the first time. I've tried so many times. And this is the first time it's sunk in. And there is something to having your life crumble. I'm reading this book by David Brooks, who I've always hated him as a pundit. But he's a phenomenal author when he writes about like non-political things. So no matter how you feel about him. And the book I've read here, it's called The Second Mountain. And essentially the premise is everyone has two mountains in their life. The first mountain is about the beginning of my bio, getting on Conan, getting recognition, sleeping with hot people, everything, because I don't love myself. And I think that's going to make me feel better. And, you know, it's funny. None of it is in this like gross, like, you know, I'm standing at the door of the comedy club and like, I'm going to get pussy and I'm going to tell the boys about it. It was all so desperately looking for love. The amount of one night stands I've thought I've been in love with, and I'm like, this is it. We'll just like have a thing. And it's just pathetic. I mean, I would feel cooler if I was just like this shitbag who just tried to fuck everyone they could. All of it was I didn't have love in my life and or love for myself. And so that first mountain, it's like a lot of people will succeed and, you know, all this stuff. And then they're just fucking vacant, nothing. Nothing. They feel nothing. They're not happy. We see this all the time. I'm sure you've talked about it a ton with, you know, all these rich people who are just infinitely more miserable. Go to India, bro. See those little kids running in the street with nothing in India, and the joy when they're singing, when they're dancing, when they're doing kirtan. It's crazy. And we're just, the stuff we obsess about is pathetic compared to that. And then there's a valley, and oftentimes that valley is either, you know, ideally it's just the woman at the HR job who's like, I've had enough. And then she goes and joins a nonprofit. But usually it's, and he even lists this, like an affair, a divorce, scandal, bankrupt, getting fired, something like that. And then the second mountain in your life, which is what I just hit, is you're not looking for happiness, which is I got this paycheck, I got this girl who she's hot. You're looking for like joy, which is like what you get from handing a homeless person a sandwich and having a conversation with him. You know, it's what you get when you see that, when you just look out at fucking nature and you go, oh, I don't know where the fuck this came from. And that's okay. You know, it's you with your daughter, right? It's all of these things that it's so much more meaningful, things that we oftentimes ignore while we're trying to get this first mountain shit. You know, how many parents do you see just constantly being like, not now, because they're on some fucking call that doesn't even fucking matter compared to, you know, whatever. And so Yeah, man. That's where I'm at.
You are, and I don't think you disagree with this assessment, extremely self-critical and self-deprecating, I think. And listening to your past interviews. So it's funny, I discovered you, I think 2017 on Rogan, when you came on and talked about being a former quote male feminist and how
The aftermath episode.
the aftermath. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then I went back and listened to the 2012 episode.
Oh,
Yeah.
don't do that. That's like it's I'm trying to think of a TV show. It's like Lost, where you're like, just don't watch the last season, and it's great. You watch the first and third appearances of Joe Rogan, and then that second one. I mean, you've probably seen it on a list of like top 10 Joe Rogan destroys fucking cuck guests. It's like, oh, that's me. There's me.
But what I was going to say there is, I think, and throughout all of that time, and noticeably on I think it was the third Rogan, 2017, you're extremely hard on yourself, I would say. Like, and I know a lot of it is comedy, right? Self-deprecation is great comedy in a lot of contexts.
No. But it's coming from
with you. Yeah, it does feel like it's for real. But it seems as though you being on that second mountain in life now, you have found a way away from a lot of that self-deprecation, at least in some capacity. Can you, I don't know, expound on that a little bit? Has that been the case? And where do you think the self-deprecation comes from originally?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think that's a great question. So a bunch of things. I mean, comedy and self-deprecation, it's very chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
Where is it self-hating people finding this outlet, right? Or does self-deprecation just do well on stage? Yeah. And I think both of those things are true. This is one of the reasons I'm taking a break from comedy. It has nothing to do with, and again, the break could be a month. It has nothing to do with, it's not just, it's not judgment of the art or, oh, I think I'm going to show up to Vulcan and suddenly be doing like getting in like a Coke gangbang. It's more that, all of these books me and you read and these studies and stuff about hyping yourself up and wanting to do good in the world and positive affirmations and all this shit, it really is antithetical to stand up. And look, you have guys like Rogan who are like crushing it. Mm-hmm. Very rare. And also, like, I don't have that kind of power right now. When I can go out, if I blow up this podcast, which is my goal, and I can go pick the cities I'm going to go to, take my own opener, me and that opener go do jiu-jitsu in whatever fucking city we're in. And like, that's great. But mostly when you're hanging around a lot of comics at my level, it's a lot of, we're gossiping about other comics. We're shitting on ourselves. If I came in and was like, hey, fellas, really been working on myself today and learning how to protect people with tourniquets, that just be like, ugh, you know what I mean? Whereas if you walk in and you have this story about blacking out the night before and not remembering the girl you took home, like that's where we're all laughing. And it's good. That's also healthy. I think laughter is such a better way to deal with trauma. And it's gotten me through so much than projecting on other people, then isolation, then just hating yourself. Laughter is so therapeutic and it is so healthy. And I'm not here to throw that or comedy or especially comedians under the bus, but there is this fine fucking line between we're having fun, I can make jokes about my trauma, but I'm going to still try to fix the things, and completely basking in it and almost enjoying it. Getting off on, oh, things are fucking terrible, I can't wait to, tell the dudes this story, as opposed to when I walk into a room with these vets now, it's like the only goal is to be a better man. So I'm not bragging about, hey, I fucked up. I'm just like, ooh, I'm about to be held accountable if I did something shitty. You know what I mean? And I want to fix that. And I'm kind of nervous. Like, that's what you want. You want to be around people who will call you out on your shit if you fuck up. And with comedy, it's really hard to find that. They'll call you out if you're doing a hacky joke, but they're not going to call you out if you're cheating on your wife. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously, I'm being hyperbolic. Like, of course they will. Like, good friends are good friends everywhere. But no matter what industry you're in, you want to hang out with people who will hold you accountable. And being in comedy where, yeah, you're being rewarded for the more of a degenerate you are, the more fucked up story I tell on stage, the bigger laugh I'm getting. Period.
Right. Yeah.
And that's hard.
So
I don't think I answered the second part of your question. How did I transition into being less self-deprecating?
yeah.
I've been around church people and I've been around Tim Kennedy.
So
And
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
well, no, like that's not everybody listening to the show. I don't want Tim to get a bunch of DMs that are like, be my friend. But like, I also listen to more podcasts like this instead of just comedy podcasts where they're talking about getting drunk and whatever. Again, I love them. I adore Bert Kreischer. I just did Danny Brown's podcast on the Your Mom's Network. You know, it's where he's just like, I mean, the guests are getting like destroyed. I think I was probably the only sober guest on that show. And it was a fucking blast. And that led me to do Dr. Drew's podcast, much more my speed nowadays. But like, I'm still gonna hang out with Danny. I'm still gonna, you know, I love all of that. But if you are at a crossroads in your life where you need to get healthy, you need to, you know, whatever, you need to think about everything you're digesting. For me, it's people in real life, but it's also briefly unsubscribe to all the comedy podcasts, you know? Like, I love Shane Gillis. He's my favorite comic right now. Like, he's so good. I mean, he is the best comic right now. He has been so helpful to me, you know, when we DM back and forth, and we finally got to do a show together in New York and whatever, but I can't listen to that right now because he's just crushing it and partying and whatever. And that makes me, because I admire him, and I just have to be honest with myself, and this sounds really lame, and I've never talked about it on a show before, but like, because I admire him, my brain goes, oh, so that's what I have to do. Right. I should go back to drinking a lot. I should go back to, you know, whatever, because he's doing it and he's more successful than me, then I have to do it. So honestly, it's like I'm listening to like sermons and like Jocko clips, and like that's the shit I need right now. If you are trying to lose weight for New Year's, you fucking better be listening to David Goggins and not Bert Kreischer. And I say that as someone who loves Bert with all of his fucking heart. Unless you're listening to Bert from October 1st to November 1st for Sober October, like, just give it a break until you start really seeing like hardcore results. It's like everything you take in matters. You know, for me, I'll start dating a girl or talking to a girl, and the second she's like, oh, we can go to McDonald's because she has fucking hot girl metabolism, and I catch myself going, yeah, I just want to like impress like the hot girl. My last or no, not my last, my COVID girlfriend, she could just she's the one who introduced me to Sonic. I'd never even been to Sonic before. And she can just plow a lot of Sonic. And I was just getting fat. And I was like, what am I doing? And it's because I wanted her to like me instead of being like, hey, I'll go get it for you, babe. But I'm also strong enough where like, I don't need that shit. Everyone, you know, if you're with people who you don't want to drink and they're like, come on, dude, you can have one. Not a healthy relationship. They're projecting. I'm not saying you have to hang out with sober people, but I'm saying you need to hang out with people who are supporting you becoming a healthier person. And so I think the more I'm around that, the more I feel like a better man, the less I have to tell everyone why I'm fucking horrible. I'm still doing it a lot. If I tell a story about feeding homeless people, it has to come with at least 2 antidotes of me completely fucking that up or feeling self-righteous or whatever. Part of me still think that's healthy because you don't want to be up your own ass and you want to hold yourself accountable. But it's far less of, you know, I'm just a piece of shit. And also, when I found out Jesus just loves you and forgives you, I was like, oh, well, why am I still beating myself up? And that's very new for me. And I'm sure that's turned a lot of people off, as it would have turned off old Jamie. But like, me trying to forgive myself on my own just didn't work. Right. And even when I was feeling good about myself, I was like, but so many people don't like me, or so many people think these things about me that aren't true. And I think when you get in touch, it's why AA has a higher power. It's like when you get in touch with some kind of God figure or something higher than yourself, you just go, oh, well, what matters is me and him. So like, we're good.
Yeah.
Don't stop trying. We want to actually keep getting better and better and better. But like your baseline is kind of like love. And if your baseline's love, it's a fuckload easier to get healthier and like yourself than if your baseline's like, fuck you, I'm a piece of shit. How do I get healthy? It's like, well, you stop saying that to yourself, because would a piece of shit go make those healthy choices? No. And then you get in that cycle that I spent a lot of my life in.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, man. And I think that a lot of times people are immediately sort of, at least I used to always sort of be turned off when people started saying things like self-love and
Oh, dude, me
all
too.
of this. I'm like, oh, they're about to bloviate about all this
Yeah.
superficial BS. But um and well, superficial is not the right word, but I was being pretty superficial actually. And I just thought it was a bunch of bullshit. And
Of
now
course.
it's like, man, so I was talking to a buddy of mine who owns he's a successful businessman. He owns a fitness business, equipment and apparel and stuff. And I was telling him I was having a bit of a self-loathing episode, and I was like, man, just at the end of the day, I lay in bed and I'm always thinking of the 80 things I could have done and should have done that day. And I start hating on myself and thinking I can do more, blah, blah, blah. And for the first time ever, man, someone asked me straight up, he was like, do you love yourself? And I was like, what? I was just caught off guard, right? I was like,
Oh,
dude, what are you talking about? What do you mean?
I
And
would
he's
have
like,
immediately started sobbing.
it hit, I was on mushrooms at the time. And so basically, yeah,
Jeez.
yeah, yeah. We were in a cabin in the middle of the woods in
Sure.
on mushrooms. It was an awesome episode. But I just stopped dead in my tracks and I was
Of
like,
course you did.
whoa. I mean, I love my wife, I love my daughter. He's like, no, 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 no. Do you love yourself? And
Right.
I'm like,
I love
I'm
books.
yeah, I'm like, I like working out, I like eating. He's like,
Deadlifts
asshole.
are pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, bro, you have to love yourself. Like,
Oh,
if you don't love yourself, then what's the point, right? And
yeah.
that it's funny how just a rhetorical question from someone you respect can just change so many things for you. And ever since that moment, I check myself when I start to feel that way. I'm like, hold on, dude, you know, you're doing it again. Here's all the
Yeah.
reasons. You can do better, strive to be better, but man, appreciate who you are and what you've done.
Right.
Right.
And I mean, here's something everybody listening can do, which is, again, oh, I would cringe at this when people were like a gratitude journal. And I'm like, I'm not going to do either of those things.
Yeah.
But I'm, as a new Jesus person, I still get like very self-conscious when I pray. When I pray for me, when I like ask for something, right? Or ask for guidance. Like that's where I'm just like, I don't know about this. I'm very good at praying gratitude, even when I'm struggling. I'll catch myself when I get scared or depressed, starting to pray, like, hey, man, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, whatever. And as I'm doing this, I just feel kind of lighter. And I'll start being like, but man, this was really cool. And like, thank you for this. And like, man, this guy's nuts, or whatever. And that gratitude morning and night, whether it's in a prayer, whether it's taking a walk and just looking up at the stars, whether it's putting your phone away for an hour to be with your kid, whether it's after jujitsu, just driving home and like before you put the radio on, like 5 minutes of just like, oh, that was hard. I'm a fucking badass, Um, gratitude has helped me so much because, to what you said, it's like people who are fans of yours or watch you or follow you, they're just like, why wouldn't this guy love himself? Like
Right.
he has everything. Not only like has everything, not like you've just been like gifted like a cool family and a good career, but like you've earned it and you're still putting good out in the world and you're trying to help other people. And but I mean, as I don't know if you would call yourself an artist or an entrepreneur, but for both of those, it's so easy to crush it all day, make one mistake, and you're just like, I knew it. This is
Yeah.
who I really am. I'm trash.
Yeah.
And but gratitude has really, 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 really helped me love myself. I mean, honestly, I feel like when I was doing like the big fancy things, I fucking hated myself, man. It was
Mm.
so much worse. I mean, God, before that third Rogan was even worse. While I was having the affair, holy fuck. Like it was, I thought about suicide every day. And that was the height of my career. And I was like in love with two people, and other people would have just like probably been able to crush that life. And there was just something deep inside me that was just like, this is bad. But you go, but I'm doing all the things. Like there's a and add social justice on top of it. And you can
Mm.
trick yourself into thinking that I'm doing all of the things for oppressed people, for other people. And that's good. That's wanting to help people who have less than you is good. But why are you doing it? Are you just doing it online? Are those same people in your life suffering? Those are the questions you have to
Yeah.
ask yourself. And I never did because again, I never had role models. I never had true masculinity. I never had any of these things. Thank God I was at least doing jujitsu all this time. So I was like, all right, but I would go be good at fighting and then I would leave. And then I would go back to my like other very artsy, more, feminine political world or whatever. But even with that, I never had true male role models, but at least I was doing something. And I think that doing something hard and masculine without me knowing probably kept me in the fight. And then now is the first time I feel like all of it's coming together.
Yeah, man, the parallels as I sit here and listen to you talk about your life and then think about my life. It's like I used to own a company. It was a chain of bars and restaurants, and on paper, at face value, whatever, I was successful, a millionaire, the
Yeah.
house, the wife, the cars, all that.
I love that
And
even my level of success in this story is so much below that. I was like, I had a savings account for the first time in my life.
dude, well,
Yeah.
but at that point, it was the emptiest I ever felt. I was depressed.
Oh,
I
buddy.
almost took my life
Yep.
several times, and
Jeez.
there were other sort of compounding issues on it. But it was like if I had told someone that at the time,
I know.
they would have never believed me, right?
I know.
Because you're doing all the things. You look like this incredibly successful
Oh, and
person.
by the way, you don't want to tell people, and then please keep going. I'm not going to interrupt you, but you
No,
don't
you're
want to
good.
tell people because you're
Right.
like, I'm going to look so stupid. Or you go, it just adds to the depression where you go, what a piece of shit I am that I can't even appreciate that I
Mm.
have all the things I've been asking for. You're too in it
Yep.
to
Exactly.
realize what's happened, to realize that all of those things are actually contributing and you just feel even less worthy of all of those things. And so that's why you isolate and you go, Rick Rubin talked about this where he goes, oh, no, I am interrupting, but Rick Rubin talked about this where all these musicians who hit the peak, why they kill themselves or why they OD. And it's like, because they didn't fix what was hurting inside them. And they thought once they reached the top, that would fix it. And they get to the top and you go, I feel worse.
Yeah.
I feel just as bad, but now there's more pressure. And so you go, okay, well, I did it. So I guess this is like my last shot.
Yeah. That's absolutely accurate in how I felt because so I grew up like really poor family, abusive parents. They were 16 when I was born. My dad did crack, my mom did oxys, and I had this poor kid complex. So I was just obsessed with being wealthy.
Yeah.
And it was like I got to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. Like that was for whatever reason, arbitrary as it is.
No, it's not
That
arbitrary. It makes total sense.
so um but it was always just that. There was nothing beyond that, right? And so when you get there and you feel empty because all you did was chase a dollar or chase some superficiality, there's no meaning in your life. And I had this epiphany where I'm like, dude, all I do is like get people drunk for a living. That's what I do. I'm not giving
Oh,
this world any value or whatever.
right.
And it's just really, and most people listening to this would probably be cynical and say, whatever, give me that problem. You know how you hear people win the lottery and they lose it all, and
Bro,
everybody's like, I wouldn't,
I,
give me that money. It's like, no,
I
dude.
did this. I did this the other day. There's this pastor named Joshua Broom who I've been DMing, we've been voice memoing like me and you did, back and forth on Instagram. And he used to be a world famous porn star, like won awards and stuff like that. Now he's a pastor, married with kids and shit like that.
Wow.
So obviously there's a lot of overlap. And there's definitely, I mean, not part of me, because I have also slept with a problematic amount of people, but like, I could see people looking at him. I've been thinking about it a lot with him, especially for like, you know, like Christians who are like maybe trying to be like celibate or whatever, where they're like, cool. Yes, I want that family and that life, and I want to like live a life of service, but also like you got to fuck a lot of hot people before you made this choice,
Right.
bro. You know what I
Right.
mean? And so
Yeah.
I'm sure that's exactly the same kind of thing people were
Yeah.
projecting onto you. Okay, so everyone's saying they want those problems, and then where are you at?
Dude, so I mean, I just got to a breaking point, and my wife, God bless her, we've been together 16 years. So
Ugh.
like, dude, we met when we were kids, and she's my
Yep.
first girlfriend, only girlfriend, wife, you know, whatever. We'll be together till we die.
Which, by the way, I'm doing it right now for your audience, which is like, I have a lot of friends like that as well, who, even though they've gone on those journeys, they have that ride or die person.
So
And I
important.
go, not that I'm projecting like or being negative, but there's a part of my depression that I hear that and I go, oh, okay, well, that's the key that he has
Mm.
that I'm never gonna have, because like I blew that opportunity.
But
So it's
it's
like
not,
I'm
bro, because
40.
I was right where you were. Like that,
Right.
even though I had her, and I isolated
Right.
from
Sure.
her, right? Like you said earlier, you isolate still, because the way I justified it to myself was I don't want to put my problems on her.
Of course.
I don't want to burden her with what I'm going through. When meanwhile, you know, eventually we have this conversation and she's like, "Hey, jackass, like we're in this together. Like tell me
Right.
this stuff, right?"
Yep.
And so anyway, I just got to the breaking point, and she was like, "Yeah, we were having our daughter, and I was gone 16 hours a day working on the business and everything else. And I was doing other stuff too, some real estate stuff and stuff like that. And she was like, you've got to just stop some of this. And so I
Yeah.
sold the company, and you know, it was the best thing I could have ever
Yeah.
done. And thank God I did it right before COVID hit and avoided that, because
Wow.
owning restaurants during COVID, bro, it would have been gnarly. Yeah.
Right. And that, to me, it's like where I'm at is trying to trust, which I've never done before, because I've had, although now I'm having a realization, which is because I've always had stuff pulled out for me, whether it was my fault or not, and or been abandoned or, you know, whatever, starting from childhood. And but as I say that, I realize, well, it's because I always thought I was the one in control.
Mm.
Whereas if you just kind of surrender, and you did, again, God or no God, you did the right moral thing and were rewarded. You would have been more fucked if you held on to what you thought was the safe thing. Comedy
Totally,
to me
totally
feels like
fucked.
the safe thing. And do I know how I'm going to be paying my bills in a couple months? Not yet. I don't. And that's what's scary. And that's when I want to start panicking and doing what I know and going, well, I'll just go back to stand up and whatever. But it's so wild that our body and our brain and our ego just goes, do the thing you know, even though the thing you know got you in this shit in the fucking first place, right? It got
Mm.
you in trouble. Whereas the more I'm just kind of like, just serve, man, just be happy and show love and serve, the more people like you, I mean, you're one of a handful of like very well-known people that I respect who I've just become friends with in the last month. And who knows what, and by the way, this doesn't mean that me and you are going to host a podcast in a month together and like my financial woes are off the table, but it's like, add another man in my life who I would like to aspire to be more like. How is that not going to pay off? Right. Like, even Tim and I, we knew each other for a year, but we didn't become friends till I started making these choices. We were fine. We were like Instagram acquaintances, whatever. And we
Mm.
podcasted together.
Meaning Tim Kennedy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like all of this stuff, all these people coming into my life, it has only happened since I've started not putting myself first. And I don't know if you had these moments, and if you did, please tell me how to get through them. But it is scary when you do start to think about, when you start to think ahead and go, how are these bills going to get paid in March? Like, if things don't you know, if the podcast doesn't take off or if whatever. But also, I just feel this like peace that I've never felt before, that I just go, keep doing the right thing, man. Even if that isn't paying the bills, keep doing the right thing, and like it'll work out.
Yeah, it's tough, dude. I mean, as as much as you don't, well, I don't know if you've made this decision or not, but it sounds like your thought process is trending away from stand up. You do have monetizable skills to fall back on, worst case scenario, right? I would say so. At least have that peace of mind, I suppose.
Well,
And
in my head, I don't. In my head, I'm like controversial enough to keep me away from like real people stuff that helps people. I'm a high school dropout, blah, 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 blah. You know, I could go on for days where to me, comedy, I mean, I remember when I did Louis J. Gomez's, I mean, we've talked about this on air. He hosts Legion of Skanks and like Skankfest and stuff.
oh yeah, I love him.
He's the best. He was having me open for him earlier this year, and I went on Skanks and his show. And I forget if, I mean, honestly, we may have talked about this at lunch and not on the air, but he was just like, dude, you're a fucking comic. You're a great fucking comic. Comedy accepts you no matter what. And so I felt safe,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean it's right. Comedy accepts you no matter what isn't really aligned with like what I want to do right now. I want to be accepted if I'm being a good man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I felt so safe with comedy because it's just like I could be like, oh, you think this is about me? Fuck you, or whatever. And I would much rather earn my keep on this planet and like show people that it's like, no, it does matter. Like, and so that's the trick. Comedy did feel like the place that I had monetizable skills, and I have a lot of imposter syndrome about like I couldn't even tell you what you were thinking about when you said that. Where I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like a different kind of comedy? Like that's all I can think of.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I can write, I can do all these things, but it's still kind of in the same vein. I think the podcast is important. I think if I walked away and if I just taught jujitsu and, you know, with the podcast, I can be funny and I can help people and I can talk about these things. And so I think what I would like to do is ideally blow up that podcast. And then if I can make just a killer living off that podcast, then it's like, if I want to go do a show, I can do a show. If I want to spend my days teaching kids, I can teach kids. I mean, fuck, dude. The reason I don't want to go totally, you know, money doesn't matter. It's because I could actually make like, I could really impact people. If
money
I'm in,
matters. Money matters.
yeah,
That
it
whole
does.
thing is just BS. And
No, if I'm impacting people right now with like nothing, then imagine the kind of shit I can do for kids with depression through jujitsu, through comedy, through art. Like I could make fucking foundations, dude. And that is what I would like to do. It's just been 40 years of like almost bam, almost bam, and so it's fighting that voice going, you can't do it, man. You've tried. Just go back, do the thing you know, go get fucking laid, do comedy, get laughs, everything will be fine. You'll make enough. You know, I could definitely be more famous if I just like went hard on comedy. I could be even more famous if I made that comedy divisive, you know. So that's sort of the war being waged currently in my
yeah.
head.
Yeah. What so let's talk about, well, there's two things I want to talk about.
It
I
better be
want
what my monetizable skills are because I still need to know that in case
we'll,
shit hits the fan.
we'll get there, bro.
Okay.
Uh talk to me about jujitsu though, because you've brought it up so many times. I know it's a big part of your life.
Sure.
Personally, I am actually, a school opened up pretty close to me, and I put in
Oh
an
boy.
inquiry to start.
Let's
I've
go.
never done any sort of martial art, and I want to get my daughter involved because she's 5, and
You
I feel
have
like
to.
it would be a
Five's a
great thing.
five's a great age.
She's doing gymnastics. She loves that. She's all
Great.
into it. But what role has jujitsu played in your life? When did you start? Why did you start?
Yeah. Well, I failed gym class, which a lot of people think is is a joke or like being, you know, exaggerating. And they go, how do you fail gym class? And I'll tell you, you get stoned every day and pretend that you forgot your shorts is what happens. And so I failed gym class, was never an athlete, was unpopular musician. how do you be an unpopular musician? Actually, now that I say that out loud, I did it. But I was obsessed with, how old are you?
35.
Okay, cool. So I'm 40, or you're a little younger, but you'll remember. I was just obsessed with all of those 90s martial arts movies.
Oh yeah.
Like I'll get chills thinking about like Lionheart or like bad ones. Like, do you remember the movie Only the Strong?
Mm-mm.
Bro, I think I talked about this on Ethan Suplee's podcast, maybe, because I'll bring it up anytime I can. But the plots of these martial art movies are so insane. So it was all about capoeira, this Brazilian dance martial art. And so it was, I think this dude was one of the bad guys actually in the new John Wick movie. But um he went to this inner city school in Miami, and he was a capoeira master, and he was going to try to get the school on track. And it's drug infested, so he starts fighting the drug dealers, but the drug dealers in that town also happen to be capoeira masters, Brazilian dance
Of
fighting.
course.
So there was a whole like dance fight off it. It was madness, and those movies were the fucking best. And
It's like
you know
Bring It On, the cheerleading movie Bring It On, where they like
this, this
cheer
is it.
battle, but
This is
with
one of
capoeira.
This is what I'm talking about. And so, it's funny because I spent so much of my life being this like anti-cop war. I mean, I'm still anti-war because I'm pro-troop, which I think
Yeah.
makes sense. But like,
I think most humans should be anti-war. It's just a general like
period. Well,
horrible bane on our existence. But
and we're so tribalized that a bunch of conservatives feel like they have to be pro-war if it's a conservative, because actually, you know what, I'm going to take that back, because now you see a bunch of pro-war liberals because it's Biden, right?
mm-hmm.
Same with Obama. I got in so much trouble talking about drone strikes under Obama on Conan, when you're like, hey, we were against that for Bush though, right? So
Yep.
shouldn't we also be against that? Whole nother topic. But so I was obsessed with these martial arts movies. And so even though I ended up in this weird, I feel like right now I'm circling back to what I knew was true in the beginning, with like wanting to be someone who could protect other people, because that's what I wanted to be when I was a kid. I played guitar. I was terrible at high school, so I just didn't think I could do anything like in like law enforcement or whatever. But me and my brothers always joke around that like we all secretly wanted to be like fucking CIA agents or some shit, and help people. And so I got into martial arts because I didn't give a fuck about sports. I didn't know anything about sports. I still don't know how football works. But I've tried to get into basketball a couple times. Every time I jump on a team, they start losing. I'm convinced I'm the reason Linsanity ended. I was like in Brooklyn during it, and I was like, I'm in. And suddenly they brought back Carmelo Anthony, and it just went like beep boop boop. And so but fighting, I got it. I wanted to be the fucking Karate Kid. I wanted to save people. And
So you
so
started when you were a teenager,
I
like
started
that young?
I started in 1999. I
Wow.
started when UFC was still on VHS tapes that they put in the porn rooms of fucking video stores, because it was just considered like snuff, like illegal cage fighting. It was pretty much only allowed in Alabama. Like so many early UFCs were in fucking Alabama because it was outlawed in most states. There weren't a ton of rules. There weren't weight classes. I mean, it was the martial arts movies we grew up on. It
Yeah,
was blood sport.
it was
For,
badass.
yeah, for you guys who jumped on for Conor McGregor or Ronda Rousey, I'm glad you're here. But also, you should know, when it started, it was the plot of Bloodsport. There was no term mixed martial arts. That didn't exist. It became mixed martial arts because originally it was style versus style. There was a ninja, bro. There was a ninjutsu guy who fought representing ninjas. He was like some white guy who also looked like he was from Alabama. But like there was a sumo wrestler, this giant fucking dude who
Yes.
came out in a sumo. There was a boxer who came out in one boxing glove that Hoist Gracie just beat the shit out of. I think he tapped
Dude,
out
I
from
remember
Mount.
that. I remember the one
Art
glove.
Jimmerman, one glove, dude, because he
So
repped
weird.
boxing. It was blood sport. It was the plot. It was style versus style. Jiu-jitsu beats everybody.
Yeah.
Now you have these like strikers who go, well, fuck, we got to train jujitsu. What happens in between boxing and jujitsu? Well, there's clinch. So we either need to know how to wrestle or do judo. So now you have these three ranges. You have striking, you have clinch, and you have the ground.
Ground. Yeah.
So people go, okay, jujitsu is clearly the best for ground. What's best for in the middle. Striking, it's going to be some kind of like Muay Thai or whatever. And then you get your rarities, your Wonder Boys, your people who make karate work, but they're still training it actively, and they're sparring. They're not doing, and so again, when I was growing up, all these karate schools were big, taekwondo schools were big. Even nowadays, like you still have like Krav Maga and shit, but a lot of shit that doesn't work. And UFC proved it didn't work. So then mixed martial arts became, we were mixing all of those. So when I started, yeah, it was still lawless. People were training in garages. My first coach was a blue belt because that's all you could get.
So you started jujitsu in 99 or martial arts in general?
So I started with Jeet Kune Do because I thought Bruce Lee, that's what Bruce Lee invented. And I thought that was the closest to mixed martial arts because he sparred, unlike a lot of these karate things. He had these great lines about like breaking boards where he goes like, boards don't hit back. But by that time, Jeet Kune Do was already being commercialized. So they were running a lot of the schools very similarly to the karate schools that Bruce Lee criticized. So then this Straight Blast Gym, which is where Connor is, this Straight Blast Gym, the guy who founded it's this guy named Matt Thornton, and he started calling out all these JKD schools and like doing challenge matches and was like, and so a Straight Blast Gym opened up in Jersey around the corner. I went in on day one thinking I knew about Jeet Kune Do and that I was starting to help out. I was really young, but I was starting to help out. Like I was getting good fast. I showed up. I'm sure you've been this guy as well. Every time you show up with 4 friends and you're the last man standing, whether it's like, my high school band, jiu-jitsu, Jeet Kune Do, there's always a group.
Oh yeah.
They're very excited about it. And then it's always me like left. So I'm getting good. And I show up at Straight Blast Gym and there's this like very jack dude, which there were not a lot of jack dudes where I was training. This very jack dude just eating pizza, maybe drinking a beer. I think just eating pizza. And I walk in and the coach he doesn't do it anymore, but his name was Paul Majatovich. It was like kind of my first role model who was like a male, I guess. And then only one for like the next 20 years. He was like, all right, well, why don't you, the gym is empty. He's like, why don't you spar Dan? And I go, what? Like fight? He's like, yeah, just fight Dan. And I remember going, but we don't, I'm trying to get out of it. I'm like, no. He's like eating pizza. And Paul goes, yeah, well, chances are if you're in a street fight, it'll be after pizza and beer, not after like a warm up. So why don't you just like fight Dan? And I was like, all right.
Shit.
And I put on my gloves and I'm thinking about, Jeet Kune Do, a lot of like the trapping stuff is based off of Wing Chun. So if you guys watch John Wick, Bourne Identity, a lot of that stuff, it's like dude throws a punch and it's not like parry, return a jab. It's like dude throws a punch, you trap, you hit the bicep, your hand comes around to back fist, you arm drag, you slice the leg, all this ridiculous shit. And so I'm like mapping that out in my head. I'm like, okay, he's going to throw a jab. I'm going to hit the bicep. I'm going to come around back fist. And this dude very nicely beats the living shit out of me with just a jab. Like I couldn't touch him. I was so gassed. I ran to the bathroom. I threw up. I remember what my head felt like. It was like the craziest headache I've ever gotten. Not from being punched, from stress, from not breathing, from getting punched. And I signed up. I was like, everything I'm learning is a lie. And here, now that I am not so mean to myself, I'll give myself a lot of props because you see that in jiu-jitsu gyms every day. You're going to have that moment, buddy. You're a jack dude. You're going to go in, some little fucking hipster that looks like me or some tiny girl is going to choke you out.
That's what I want. I want to experience that.
I know you do, but that is rare. And I will beg your listeners, but you're still going to have a moment where you're going to make crazy excuses. You're gonna go, well, if I had my gun. It's like, yes, if you had your gun, you could have killed that 17-year-old who choked you out. Correct. But like we do crazy things in our brain. And there are so many people who show up, especially jack dudes, who they do get fucked up and they leave. And they say, well, if it was a street fight, I could have kicked him in the nuts, or it's fine. And they try to forget about it. And I had that moment. If I went back to Jeet Kune Do, I would have felt so good. I would have felt so tough. But that's not how you get good at things. And when you listen to a lot of your favorite fighters, I remember hearing an interview with BJ Penn, who was like my first favorite fighter because I don't look Hawaiian, but I am. and I look like the people who overthrew the queen illegally. But the BJ Penn was like, yeah, I scrapped in Hawaii every day, and I thought I was tough, and then I went into this jujitsu gym, and 17-year-old girl rear naked choked him, and he signed up the next day. That's the manly move. Is you go, oh, I'm bad at this, I got to double down. I got to keep doing it. So yeah, that's how I started. And then comedy took off, and I took like a fucking 5-year break, and I ended up in New York when I was like, I'm out of shape if I'm doing comedy, and I got to get back to jiu-jitsu. Marcelo Garcia opened up his academy in New York. He's the greatest of all time. And then I got to spend, 10 years training with him. And yeah, just followed me, man. I've been so lucky. I've, been able to train privately with everyone from like Hodger Gracie to, I mean, like the best in the world. And which is cool because with my size, I need to be very technical, and I need to be very tricky, and I need to have that kind of knowledge. I couldn't just be big. So that meant, this is a metaphor for life, but that meant I got my ass kicked for a lot longer, which I'm kind of hoping is what's going to happen with the career thing. But then when I got good, I got very good. Suddenly, like once it hit, because I was just assessing that entire time I was getting my ass kicked instead of just hating myself. I was just like, man, it's cool that I'm here. And then I got very good. And now, even recently, like before the Ortega fight, like me and Gabe, the head coach of like 10th Planet, like we got called in to be like Volkanovski's training partner when he was like in Austin with Craig, training with Craig Jones. And I mean, not his only partners, but like for 10th Planet, when him and Craig Jones came to 10th Planet,
that's awesome.
We were the dudes. We were just the little good guys. So getting to do rounds with, one of the greatest champions that the UFC's ever had, and like having competitive rounds, like good rounds. When I do have imposter syndrome about fighting and stuff like that, I go, because I've never fought. I competed in jiu-jitsu, but that's not fighting. But I'm like, ooh, I'm a phenomenal training partner, and I'm a phenomenal fighter, and I'm a very good teacher because of all the ass kickings. That's what makes me a good teacher. I can read when someone's about to quit. I can tell them the little thing instead of just giving them this huge explanation or being like, well, you could do this or this or this or this, and you see their fucking eyes glazing over. I think the performer in me can sense that. And now, upping it and getting to help out at Tim Kennedy's place, where it's like, these are people who are training for survival or to protect other people, and then realizing what a gift this knowledge I have, that's just made me want to double down on all of this shit. I don't know how yet, but it's made me want to.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, man, because I was listening to, there's this guy, Alex Hormozy. Are you familiar with him by any chance? He's a kind of like a business entrepreneur guy. He
remember, just to remind you and your audience, I was a broke feminist vegan like 8 years ago. So a lot of these names are new to me. Very excited to hear about them.
No, so Alex is great. He's, in my opinion, on the precipice of genius, just the way his mind works in a business context. Sure. And he's started and sold multiple like $50 million plus businesses, and he's a meathead. Like, he looks like me, without the tattoos.
Way. That's fucking awesome.
Yeah. And so I love his stuff. I love his podcast. He's very practical, but he talked about, and this is where I see the parallels. He talked a lot about if he had to start over from scratch, what he would do. And because he gets that question a lot, and the way he answered it, I really liked. It was really elegant. He said, I've started over from scratch several times. Every time I sold a business, I was starting from scratch in a completely different industry. And all I had from that, aside from the money, obviously from selling that previous business, was the skills I obtained from the various successes and failures of my past, which is a very unique synthesis. Every individual, I mean, dude, you have an extremely unique set of skills and experiences and very interesting life events that you've experienced, right? That you bring to the table. And I think that the synthesis of that is going to be something of value for people. Now, the medium through which you decide to deliver that that's going to be up to you. but I
Right.
think that you have a ton to offer. I mean, I was extremely interested in just talking to you about your life
Yeah.
and being, I mean, your jujitsu experience, your comedy experience, your uh,
I
experience
mean,
in
dude,
politics.
my the first week I taught a 10th, I was teaching a 10th planet actually, in Austin for a while. And then comedy started taking off. And I was like, hey, I don't like, I walked away. I still train there and they're all great friends, but I was like, I want to be consistent. Like if I do this, I want to take it seriously. Like I don't need an extra like fucking $30 a class. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
if my class is Friday at 5 and I'm just on the road for like half of them, I'm like, that kind of sucks. Now with that said, that's most jujitsu teachers, but like I would take it seriously. Um, but the third or fourth class, I just randomly, I was like, I don't know if they're going to like this, but I just gave some spiel about depression and why we're in here and why we're all together and blah, blah, blah. And it got like an applause break. And, but the reason I say that is one of the coaches came up to me. He's like, I've never seen a teacher get a standing ovation in their own gym. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason I'm saying that isn't to be like, I'm so good, but it's
No,
like,
I
oh,
know.
right. Even with the jujitsu, teaching people how to whatever, I was like, you're right, because of all the shit I've been through. And by the way, I think I said that on a day I was very depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very depressed. And the class, that is what happened. And the class did really good. I just had like some stupid breakup. And I go, I didn't want to be here today. And lots of you feel that way. Maybe not today. And then I gave the spiel. And so yeah, even in this place that's not a self-help podcast, you're right, man. Like I could bring that there. I think, you know, for me, again, I haven't been friends with guys like you. I haven't been, and I've always just told myself, well, I can do the talky part, but I'm so bad at business because so I grew up poor, but I went the opposite route that you
Mm-hmm.
did. I wish I went your route. Again, now I'm one of those guys who said that. Like if I was like, I'm gonna, but I guess I kind of did when I started to get, famous. But I was like, I'm always gonna be poor. So when my life crashed, when I lost everything, part of my brain was like, yeah, it's about time that
This is what
happened.
I expected. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's interesting. People that grow up like that. So obviously all of my childhood friends grew up in similar circumstances, and it really is, you go one way or the other. It's like you rebel against everything your parents represent, and in that context it means you strive for greatness, right?
Yep.
Whereas, a lot of times upper middle class kids are rebelling against their parents, and that means doing drugs and fucking off.
Yeah.
But for me it was like, I'm going to get good grades and show these sons of bitches.
Right. Right. Right.
um
Right.
so it is interesting, man, how that stuff plays out. But no, dude, it is, from my perspective. And look, I think these days, especially the year 2022, a lot of your value is in the audience you've cultivated, and you having roots in various different areas and interests in different areas and connections. And I mean, I saw you on Tim Pool's show
Yep.
and really enjoyed that. And it's great that you and Marjorie Taylor Greene are best buddies.
I wish I had her contact info. I have never gotten more. I got thousands of tweets that next day
I believe it.
where they're like, you guys need to go on the road together as like a comedy duo.
It was sweet. I was like, oh, look at them.
Even my conservative friends, when I said I did that, were suspect because she is not popular. But
Yeah.
my goal was go on that show and prove that two people who are so wildly different can hear each other out.
Yeah.
Like
It's
that's
interesting,
all I
dude.
said in my head.
Most of the time, most people, with a few exceptions, it's like if you actually stop and listen to them speak on issues for an extended period of time or have a conversation with them, you realize, oh, they're not as bad as everyone paints them to be superficially, right? I mean, of
Dude,
course there are
she was
exceptions.
lovely, like off
Yeah,
air too.
seemed
Like,
that way.
what? And that was even pre me finding Jesus, which is hilarious because she may have been the first one. I remember on the air, I made some joke where I was like, "Don't make me use my Jewish space lasers against you," and she's like, "I'm gonna take you to church and get you a good Christian girl," and we're just laughing it up. And now I'm like, I kind of want to go to church and meet a good Christian girl.
For real. MJT or MTG,
MT.
whatever. Yeah.
Whatever. This
hit him up.
just mentioning her name just got us banned from whatever.
Probably.
No one's gonna hear this podcast anymore.
Probably, dude. Yeah, whatever. Fuck them. But no, dude, you to me, like the eyeballs you have and the audience you've cultivated, I mean, it's there's a lot of value there, and there's a lot of people who care about what you have to say. And so let's talk about the podcast, because is it when did you start it, and what?
12 episodes in.
So it's new.
Yeah, it's brand new. Go rate and review it, everybody. I'm also like shadow banned on Instagram, so whenever you're like your audience, and I'm like, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's like 12 episodes in. Sorry, I'm just like on a personal level, just thinking about the stuff you were saying, and I'm like, you're making me love myself. You're playing your mushroom friends role to me, because I'm realizing, like, yeah, man, I'm getting church people to do jujitsu. I'm getting jujitsu people to ask me about either God stuff or feeding the homeless. Like I talked about on the podcast, you know, the story of me starting to go hand out sandwiches at right around the clubs I used to play. And some other people are volunteering to do it in their city. So I want to like figure out a way to make it like, hey, every Sunday, like we have little teams around the country that go out and do this. And so it's not that I have the biggest audience, but it's certainly like a very diverse audience, especially since I started going on Tim Pool and Glenn Beck's show, where it's like a ton of conservatives. That's all of my new audience is pretty much all conservative. And all of my old audience that stayed is all liberal. So it's like, oh, now I have this chance to actually try to, because I think the biggest thing too is people are so sick of tribalism. And so to answer your question, so the podcast, you know, what we talked about earlier, called Advice Not Taken, I want to focus more on mental health and comedy. And every time, you know, because I got so many new followers from Pool Show or Glenn Beck Show, I was like, okay, I guess I got to be political. And my instinct was do what I did before, which is, all right, well, now I guess I'm like the centrist guy who makes fun of the left and like sometimes makes fun of the right. And it felt so gross. And I don't even like reading the news. Even, you know, my last 3 appearances, I've been on Glenn Beck's a lot. On Glenn Beck's show, we talked about suicide on the last one because of Ted Cruz's daughter and how that should not be a fucking political issue. We talked about how to fight with your family on Thanksgiving if you disagree with them politically. Like, I'm finding a way that even when I talk about politics, it can still be around mental health. It can still be around, again, just Jesus shit, right? Like, bring people together. Don't judge people who are different than you or have less than you. Love everybody. And so when we even talk about political stuff on Advice Not Taken, it is through that lens. And then it's just, hey, we're all trying to get better with me. But also, you know, when I was thinking about suicide again, it's like, I guess we're talking about that. And I'm really proud of it because it seems to be helping a lot of people. It's not as big as my other podcasts yet. And again, it's really new, so I got to be easy on myself. But the people who are seeing the clips on Instagram, the people who are listening to the show, it is affecting more people than my old podcast that had way more listeners or subscribers or whatever. And so I just have to, again, just have faith. Like, this is the right thing. We're doing it the right way. And then, you know, hopefully it grows from there.
Yeah, dude, just give it time and keep doing the right stuff, man. I don't see why it wouldn't. I think it's like that moment you had in your jujitsu class where you started to talk about mental health and you realized that it resonated with everyone when they gave you the applause, right? It's like, I told you when we were messaging that I used to be a lefty. I did my grad school at UC Berkeley, and I was
that's
like
when I knew we were going to, that's when I knew we were going to be like really good friends. It's like, cause I would have had, you know, a lot of these relationships I have with like people who talk about like masculinity and stuff, I try not to make it self-serving because I'm so new to this that all I want to do is be like, teach me. And when you told me that, I was kind of like, oh, we're actually going to be able to help each other. This is great.
Oh, dude, I'm just trying to figure life out. Like that's the way I treat it every day. And I think if anybody acts like they're not, then they're just full of shit. But
totally. Yeah.
When I was at Berkeley, I was doing grad school. And so I had to teach. I taught a lot. I taught a bunch of different classes. And what I would tell my students was, because you would have office hours outside of the lecture, and they would come see me with any questions they had. A lot of what I taught was pre-med students. I taught physiology and biomechanics and stuff like that. And they would come and have all these questions. And I'm like, why didn't you ask them during class? They're like, oh, I'm embarrassed because I didn't. Like, stop right there. If you have that question, I guarantee you most of your classmates have that question, and you're doing them a disservice by not asking it and getting the answer. Right.
That's it.
And so when you talked about mental health, it resonated because we all have those questions, brother. And talking about it is going to find an audience just that same way. Every single human is flawed. And unless they're full of shit, they acknowledge that.
Well, and what was interesting is, and again, not to be political, but like, I thought I talked about mental health a lot on like my old Lefty show, which was very popular. And the response I got was so different because there is something about like victim mentality. Whenever I heard the words victim mentality, I just went like, ugh, because it was known as a conservative thing, and anything conservative was bad to me. But
which is hilarious because I don't consider myself a conservative, but I absolutely loathe victim mentality.
Right. Well, so maybe you'll agree with me, because I'll even give old Jamie some credit here. Usually back in the day, when you heard victim mentality, it was some rich politician who was born into privilege, who was telling like the black single mother of five, to pull herself up by her bootstraps, when like, it's like, well, they have all the boots right at the White House. And so this is still happening now. I'm sure conservatives feel this way with Biden, who are struggling, right? Depression, death to despair, opioids, like we're fucked right now. We're not doing good.
Yeah.
And the politicians seem like they're doing fine. And so whenever you hear someone be like, it's funny, conservatives used to do it with wealth disparity, and liberals did it with COVID stuff. Yeah, we're going to close your business, but like, you'll be fine. Yeah. And it's like, well, easy for fucking you to say, right? So conservatives, liberals listening, there you go. That's what happens on the podcast. I will not stop when I just prove my point. I will look for the other fucking side. There it is. We found it. So I always thought that was whatever. And I realized that so much of me talking about mental health on the podcast when I was liberal had to do with me. It was feel bad for me. It's, I'm so sad. I can't do this, blah, 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 blah. And then everyone else would go, yeah, me too. Let's all take a self-care day, and like would watch Netflix or would eat shitty or would drink or whatever. And of course that happens in conservative circles as well, but it was almost like applauded when you were sad. He's so brave, right? Which, by the way, talking about it, yes, you should be applauded. Where now, I'm not like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you fucking pussy. But now I can honestly say, like, the feminine part of me, I can be vulnerable. I can talk about my feelings. The masculine part of me goes, cool, let's pick ourselves up and let's figure it out. And let's like fix it. And so the messages I got when I started to talk about mental health from the more either conservative side, or I started my Instagram over COVID and I was doing a lot of jiu-jitsu content. It was the first time that a lot of men were seeing my content. And those messages to this day, I mean, I'm talking about ones I saw this morning. Those ones hit harder, because it's not like, yes, queen, we're all sad or whatever. It's like dudes who haven't really heard a lot of that stuff before, and probably felt like you were describing how you felt when you were depressed and being successful. And so instead of me, when I had that soft cancellation or whatever the fuck you want to call it after the affair, the only option for me that was being offered, or seemed to be, well, you got to make a heel turn. You got to be the anti-feminist conservative. I said this on Tim Pool's show, where it's like, if I wrote a book called From Feminist to Freedom Fighter, and it was just me like riding a giant red pill, like I would have millions of dollars and also be suicidal like you were. And, but now, again, in this conversation, sorry guys, this ended up being a real therapy session for me. Now I realized it's like, no, dude, you actually have this conservative, manly audience, and you get to talk about mental health. You don't have to just own the libs to get this audience. I have learned I mean, in my life, it's like the conservatives are just straight better people than the liberals I used to hang out with, which is why I started asking questions about their politics. Cause I'm like, oh, well, if you're just a good person, I kind of want to know why you feel this way. Um, but it's like now I actually have this audience that doesn't really talk as much about mental health or about some of these like vulnerabilities or whatever. So it's not that I have to be a conservative who bashes liberals. I can just be a conservative that brings something completely fucking new to the table that's gonna help everybody.
Yeah. And I think that, like you said earlier, people are just tired of the tribalism, the left versus the right stuff. And most of us,
It's hacky.
because
Yeah.
it really is, and because Overton's window has just been, I mean, you don't even see it anymore. It's gone so far, you
Yeah.
know, away. And many of us have found ourselves sort of in between being like, well, my values haven't really changed, but now all of a sudden I'm heterodox and
Right.
I'm not right or left because I believe in all of these social causes that would make me traditionally on the left, but I also believe in meritocracy and hard work and individualism, which
Well, and I'm
aligns
also, yeah, what you were talking about with like the lines being blurred. I'm like, well, I don't want to march for white supremacy and I don't want to bring my kid to a drag show. So what the
exactly.
fuck?
What
Like,
am I?
both of those things are not good.
Right,
Right?
right.
It's like,
and
come
and
on, man.
and it's true. I was actually really shocked, man, when I it's funny because when I reflect back on my life and the way that I did quote pull myself up by my bootstraps, essentially getting out of, that shitty trailer park and dealing with, parents that beat the shit out of me and all the stuff that I had to deal with, like,
Yeah.
and I saw my mother take her food stamps, sell them for pennies on the dollar and use the cash to buy drugs, right? So like
I feel that, man.
I saw the abuse of social safety nets
Right.
and all these things, and I'm like, I still came out of all of that
Yeah.
being a lefty and went to UC Berkeley,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I don't know how I was just blind to the abuse of all those systems that are not functioning the way they should in those circumstances, and for me, hard work was what got me
Yeah.
where I wanted to be,
Well, and
and I
what's funny is when I was liberal, I didn't notice. I mean, I witnessed some of the same stuff you did, but even like for me, I refused to take healthcare or benefits when I was broke because I was just like, well, I'm an artist and this is
mm,
my choosing. And I
right.
chose not to go to college or to drop out of high school. And I chose to pursue comedy. So like it wouldn't be fair for me to take from people who are struggling. But actually, what I did was a pretty conservative move. You know what I
A
mean? Where it
hundred
was like,
percent.
yeah, I'm not going to take from the government. I'm going to work. But I was doing it with a liberal mindset of because I want to help people who are less fortunate than me, which, by the way, the more conservatives I know, they want to do that shit too. They just don't want to do it through the fucking government,
Yeah.
which is where I'm at. Like, I've been calling myself a bleeding heart centrist, or I mean, honestly, we're getting close to a bleeding heart, like libertarian or conservative. But,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, very similar to you, dude.
Yeah, and when I started to really open up and listen to a lot of these conservative thinkers, like Thomas Sowell, for example, and reading a lot
Yeah,
of his books, and
I got to get on that.
yeah, yeah, man, he's fantastic. He's just such a powerful intellectual, and I mean, he's truly one of a kind. And even more recently, I don't know if I'd even consider him conservative, but Jordan Peterson and some of these
Sure.
guys,
Yeah.
it's like I realize I'm like, man, it's it's not even that, like, I don't know the best way to put this, but for example, you look at single parenthood rates, and it's like in the 1960s, white Americans were at like 0.5% single parents households, right? And today they're at 35%. And in black Americans, it's like 25% to 75%, right? It's
It's
like
really bad. Yeah.
clearly trending in the wrong direction. And
Yes.
what has happened in that period of time? We've essentially replaced the father with the state and said it's okay if you're single. Here are all these benefits that would, and I saw it play out in my own household, and I saw it
Yep.
play out in all the households around me, right? And it's like eventually you have to say, well, perhaps there's something different we could be doing if we genuinely care about solving the problem. And I think
Right.
that's what it comes down to, man. It's
And
like,
liberals don't care about solving the problem as much as like
yeah,
assigning blame, where
right.
it's like, I remember as you were saying that, I was thinking about how the old version of me, and I wasn't thinking about it, I was listening, but it's still programmed how the old version of me would respond.
You're ready to
It's
clap
like,
back. Yeah.
yeah, where it's like, we're shaming single parents, we're shaming women, we want women
Not
to
at
stay in
all.
abusive relationships. What about gay couples? Are we saying that two men can't or two women can't? And it's like, no, we're
Not
just
saying that at all.
we're looking at science and statistics, and we're going, how can we all come together to make sure our children are being raised so they're not turning into what they are turning into right now?
That's it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then if someone is in a circumstance where they did have to get out of a relationship, where they did have to, whatever, how can we as a society still give that child the best thing they need, not shame them and disown them and go, oh, you're with a single mom or you're with the gay parents or whatever. But it's like, okay, well, we know what a kid needs. And that kid doesn't have that. So how can we instill through mentorship, through schooling, through jujitsu, through whatever, how can we instill those same values? Like, that's what the conversation could be. And even like with the drag shows, like, I do not think that the majority of liberals, the majority of LGBT people, even the majority of trans people are groomers. What I think is the majority of them are fucking idiots. And they're so nervous to criticize things that are truly bad. Any child being brought to anything that is sexual, whether it's, heterosexual or gay or whatever.
Exactly.
And they're so afraid to criticize it that they are being called groomers, because you have a bunch of liberal intellectuals and people on Twitter who are just like, I guess I gotta fucking defend this. And then they're just defending it when it is so clearly fucking bad.
Yeah.
And asinine. But yeah, chances are the majority of gay people just want to live in their little fucking cul-de-sac and do their life. And they also would not want their child going to some fucking drag show. And so because the left just isn't intellectually honest, because again, and I'm sure there are versions of this on the right as well, maybe defending certain stuff that Trump said or whatever, where it's
absolutely,
we just gotta fucking defend this now, because neither side is being honest, because we are so tribalized and it is so us versus them. We're never going to come up with solutions, where it should be really easy for me to say, hey man, I don't want kids having fucking hormone replacement. I don't want a fucking someone who's born male beating the shit out of a female in MMA. I don't think that any child should go to a fucking drag show. Also, I don't think we should bully trans adults, and I don't think we should be cruel to them. And I think we should be empathetic. And I think that they should have the fucking same rights that we have when they become fucking adults. All of those things should be true, and I feel like you rarely hear them in the same paragraph.
Yeah. Well, the right and the left act as though those things must be mutually exclusive, and they
Correct.
don't have to be at all. And look,
Nope.
dude, this is why Rogan is so popular. He represents that. He's like, a man and a man should be able to be married, but also I like to hunt elk and I believe in hard work. It's like,
right.
Why can't you just be practical in what you believe? You don't have to play sides. You don't have to be on a team.
It is a very scary time to be authentic, which also means it is a very exciting time to be authentic. And 100%. I think that I can look at you and say that, and I think that's even what you were alluding to with me and my career.
Yes.
But it's so hard, again, if I was going to beat myself up, I'd be like, well, Rogan had all that fucking Fear Factor money, and then he started the podcast from his house. And by the way, whenever people ask me podcast advice, I tell them the Rogan model. Like, that guy wasn't trying to appease anyone. He was just being as authentic as possible. But for someone like me who was starting from like literal scratch, no offense to this guy, I sold my multi-million-dollar business scratch, right? But like literal scratch, still I'm starting again from scratch. I see the stuff that I post on mental health and how that tracks number wise, right? Like, hold on, let's see. And again, I think I'm shadow banned, but the clip I posted an hour before, this can't be right. So I only have 20,000 followers ish, but it says 7 likes. And I posted a clip from my last podcast about, someone wrote in my friends say I'm really great, but I have these dark thoughts. And if they only knew the dark thoughts I had,
Mhm.
they wouldn't love me. And we had this post talking about how social media makes you feel, that makes you feel like you're the only person who's fucking suffering. And whatever, all this stuff. It's a really good clip from a really good episode of a podcast talking about important stuff. And it's like that shit will get buried. And if I wrote some fucking fuck Ron DeSantis thing, that I would be the king. They would hire me at Instagram, right? And so it's gonna take, and I'm saying it's gonna take, instead of being self-deprecating or victimy, it's gonna take a lot of fucking fortitude and a lot of pushing forward to get past that shit and be like, I know this is still the right thing. And I just have to keep going. But the days where I don't, I'll do this show or I'll do Glenn Beck's show and I'll get a couple hundred new followers and they'll be like, what you're doing is really important. And when I'm at my lowest, or Glenn Beck will write me. Dr. Drew wrote me after I did his show. It hasn't aired yet, but he was like, you're a good man. And at my lowest, I want to go, cool, get me a job. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And it
I know what you
sucks.
mean, dude.
And I hate thinking like that. I fucking hate it. But it does make things a lot scarier and trickier to be like, okay, but we're doing the right thing. We're doing the right thing, and that's what I'm battling. And I'm saying this again, not to be victimy, but I'm sure so many of your listeners right now are going through a version of that. It doesn't even have to be career wise. It could be, I've been miserable in this relationship for 3 years and I'm either going to fucking kill myself or have an affair or whatever, which I've also been through. And you just go, well, this is probably as good as it's going to get because I don't deserve to be happy. Right. Or like, I should just stick it out.
Yeah.
Or whatever, like it is hard to restart when it feels like you'll have nothing, but also I know that's what has to happen.
It's also in a weird way kind of exciting too, though. You
I
have to
know. That's
admit
what Bert
it
was saying to
is.
me.
Dude, it is.
Yeah.
Those are the most fun times, bro. Like
Yeah. Well, looking back, when
looking
you're in
back,
it, it's half
100%.
fun
Yeah,
and
yeah,
half
yeah.
whatever. And I keep telling myself that, by the way. Like, that's really good advice.
Yeah.
Y-
One day you'll be like, man, I remember when I was saying this, and wow,
Right.
those were crazy times, but that was a lot of fun, And
Right. Yeah. Remember when I canceled that show to go hand out peanut butter sandwiches to homeless people and then did Dave's podcast and had a complete existential crisis on air? Yeah. I mean, that's what
good
led to
stuff.
this. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, I
dude,
will be saying that in front of millions of people one day.
you will. You
Yeah.
will. I believe it fully, man. And like I said, I just think that the combination of you mentioned starting from scratch, and
Yeah.
you're starting from scratch monetarily, but the accumulation of your life experiences is far from scratch, right?
That's
That's
such a cool way.
that's the value. That's
Yeah.
the
And
value.
I don't know if that's something you've harped on before, but that's the first time. I don't want to get distracted, but I want to write it down. So maybe one of us will remember after this podcast. But like, you're the first person who said that to me
It's true,
ever.
though.
You're the
It's true.
first one who has said that experiences are an ass, however you phrased it, because you almost made it sound like it is as important as monetary. And then take it a step further, and this is huge for everyone listening, I think. Take it a step further, and it's like your negative ones. For me, when I went through
Yes.
all my bad stuff, I was like, the negative is something to be overcome and then buried. So when I first got out of the whole suicide shame spiral, that next level was just be a good person so that everybody can forget what happened,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Whereas when things have really started to turn around, which is like recently, is no. You actually have to own and use all the bad stuff that happened to you to help other people, which means you're right. Because whenever someone would say, yeah, like, dude, but you got through, I was like, yeah, but it's still such a shame, horrible thing in my heart. It's going to make people take me less seriously. It's going to get gigs canceled. It's going to, oh, by the way, all these things have happened. Not that, oh, I can stop the guy who's going to kill himself because he's having an affair. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or the woman Or God, when I started reading about affairs, the amount of like married women with children who are like professional lawyers and shit saying the same dumb shit I said, you know, to be able to talk to that person, to be able to talk to, yeah, man, all those people. It's like, oh, fuck, you're right. I do see what you're saying, but I've never heard it put in like a career way where I've only thought of those negative things as a liability that I just have to bury and work twice as hard to show people that I'm not that person. Instead of actually being able to be like, no, I was that person to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I've learned from it. I've grown. And this is something you do, which I never would have thought, find much more in good Christian community, not like the fucking judgmental whatever, but like good religious community, because it's like, yeah, Jesus was kind of about that forgiveness shit. And also conservatives, which is hilarious because me and you probably were also drawn to liberalism because it seemed like the compassionate, welcoming, inclusive party. So like, yeah, man, of course, who the fuck wouldn't want to be inclusive and
Exactly.
nice, you know?
Yeah, man. No, it is like, in my opinion, more of an asset. What your life experiences are more of an asset than anything else. And
You
especially
hear that,
the failures.
investors?
Yeah. Especially your failures. And so right after grad school, I recruited for almost a decade. Like, so I would work with companies. I had all this background in science, but I didn't want to be a scientist because it was boring as fuck being in a lab, and I didn't want to teach because it didn't pay dick.
Right.
And so I found this niche, this career niche called scientific recruiting. So like a pharma company or Boeing or Northrop Grumman or a chemical company, whoever.
I've protested all of those companies.
Yeah, well, they're pieces of shit in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But you know, at the time, I'm just young and trying to make some money. And
of course.
So they would come and say, we need a chemist with this skill set, or we need this type of engineer. And I would find and recruit that person. So for almost a decade, that's what I did. I interviewed 10, 20, 30 people a day. So I've interviewed thousands of people for jobs. And then when I owned my own company, obviously interviewed people. I got up to about 100 employees before we sold. And so now I talk about recruiting and talent acquisition. Like I did an event this past weekend where I talked to a room of entrepreneurs. I don't even like put that on my social media or anything, but it's something I do.
That's awesome.
And what I always tell people, dude, and I promise I'm going to make a point here.
No, this is great.
That when I interview people, what I care about the most and what I look for the most is failure. What have your failures been? Because here's the thing, dude, I have learned almost everything I know from failing. I don't learn much when I succeed, right?
Right.
I don't. But when I fail, when I get punched in the fucking face, when I fall down in the mud and get all disgusting from life's, cruel, cold nature, I learn a lot, right? And so when I talk to people and they're conveying to me in an interview that they can do no wrong and they're so great and their one big flaw is that they're a workaholic, I'm like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Dude, failure is the best teacher.
Yeah, and I'm trying to make it, and this is still, by the way, a self-deprecating quality. You've probably picked up on it. I don't know if your audience has, but how I have to keep saying things like, but for your audience, because the idea of me getting help from a friend is just like, well, I don't deserve that. But if we can help others, but I think that one of the things that I felt a lot that may be relatable to your audience, is you hear those speeches. I've heard those. I've heard really so many different variations of you win or you learn, all that stuff.
Yeah.
There was this one guy who had a great one, which was like very tangible, which is like, let's say we'll use relationships because I've been thinking about relationships a lot too, as I'm kind of saying no to them around Christmas like a fucking idiot. Let's say you have 25 relationships before you find the person you're supposed to marry and start a family with. Wouldn't you be excited after every breakup because you're one closer to 25? Same with your dream job, right? Any kind of failure where, oh fuck, I failed, but this is number 16, so I'm almost at number 25, right?
Right.
That number does exist. We just aren't given which one it is.
That's a great
Right?
point. Yeah.
I know. But I hear that and I go, yes, I hear your speech. And I was inspired for 5 seconds before I related it to your audience, which is like, you know, even people looking at me right now, I'm still on a podcast with you. I'm still in a apartment. I got this fucking stupid art. I don't know what it means, like behind me. Like I'm okay, you know? Um, and so many people will ignore that because they go, but I have all failures. Like at my lowest, I go, but I'm just in quicksand, man. And the times I've been suicidal, it's not like, you know, you just feel like you're out of options.
Yeah.
I talked about this on Glenn Beck's show because we've both been through it. And I've never related to someone so hard. You know, when you like meet a new best friend and you're like, you like that band? I like that band. With me and Glenn, it was like, you thought this when you tried to kill yourself? I thought this when I tried to kill yourself. You tried to divide America? I tried to divide America. It's very like trauma bonding our friendship. But we both thought like, yeah, it just makes sense. Like, I'm not even being dramatic. It's just you go, well, my life's over. Right.
Yeah.
So the cancellation, you go, oh, my life's over. So I just, all right. That's what they want.
Yeah.
That's what they want me to
do. Run. See you
I
later.
kill myself. Exactly. Yeah. Or, you know, more recently, it's more insidious because it's like, well, you made all the right choices. You're doing all the right things. You're being a really good man. You know, there are places to grow, but like your last big breakup, you got an email saying that it was the safest she ever felt with a man. It just didn't work. You know,
you got an email saying that?
Well, we had like, it was because we had to stop seeing each other because every time we saw each other, it was just like, well, we could probably get back together. But
email.
But yeah, no, I finally have, dude, for me, for someone who's been soft canceled, you want those receipts now. Back in the day, I didn't even save text messages because I'm like, we all love each other. Why would people do that to people they care about? And now I'm just like, I have so many unread messages, like hundreds of unread messages, and half of them I was just like, not again. Yeah. But and then you still are broke, or you still are single over Christmas, or you still, all of those things happen and you go, well, I guess doing the right thing doesn't work either. I'm just a piece of shit. And so these failure lessons, you're so right. And I promise I'm going to take all of that to heart. And really, I mean, until I have to like coach later, I'm canceling my plans because I just want to like think about this podcast. But the times where it's hard for me and for your listeners, I think it's when you do feel like you're drowning and you're like, cool. But if I have another failure before there's some kind of fucking stability, I'm going to drown. Yeah. And how do I just get to stability? You know, when I am like praying for things, I'm not just like, let me speak in front of millions of people. I'm like, let me just feel okay so that I can go do the right thing. Instead of, you know, I want to be rich, I want to be whatever. I'm like, that's not even a fucking option to me. And I know that's the exact opposite way of how I need to think. But that is kind of the struggle right now, right? It's like, how do you accept your failures when it feels like, yeah, there's no ground to walk on.
Yeah. What I like to do, and I tend to do it audibly, like, yeah, because for me, conversations with myself really only get me so far. So again, I do have my wife who is amazing, and so I get to talk about these things with her. But what's the best way to phrase this? So as great as she is and our marriages and everything, I mean, we have arguments like all married people do, right? And a lot of times it's over financial stuff. Usually it's over me wanting to do some crazy thing with sum of money. Right. And what I like to do when we go down those roads, and it's real insidious back and forth, just stop and let's look at what we do have. Like, yeah, what do we have? Let's stop focusing on the negative and say, I mean, like you were just saying earlier, you started down that path. You were like, I've got this apartment. I have, you know, I'm on this podcast with you. Right. I've got shitty art.
Right.
I've got all these things, right? That
It's
like
beautiful.
you do
Bro,
have
I
a
gave that
lot.
advice. Yeah, I gave that advice to you earlier in the podcast when I was talking about gratitude.
Yes.
Like it's
And yet you still end up saying,
Is
if
that
I have
wild?
one more failure.
Isn't that fucking wild? Yeah. But that's how I'll use the word again. That's how insidious it can be.
Mm-hmm.
Where you
I
hear
get
it,
it,
you
man.
say, that's why my podcast is called Advice Not Taken, right? I like literally give it in the same podcast. And then an hour later, I think I'm somehow special where I'm like, yeah, but what about me? Like someone said this to me on the show. I forget who it was, but it's like even the self-deprecation, even the I'm a failure, it's also narcissistic
Mm-hmm.
because it's still just like, but I'm different, but I'm
Yeah.
special.
Yeah.
I'm so sad. I'm so, I'm
It's
such a,
still me, I.
it's, yeah, yep.
It still is, dude.
That's it. And I think again, that's why I've been so focused on just trying to give and be part
Mm-hmm.
of communities. And then just catch myself every time I'm just like, yeah, but how am I gonna like what the fuck am I supposed to do? And I'm sure you feel this way too. I don't know if you experience this during your transitions,
Oh, dude, yeah.
but there's another part of, but well, no, not just this, but something else that's kind of shitty is you just go, hey, I just want to know, like, hey, God or whoever, I just want to know what I'm supposed to do so that I can focus on it. Because me and you are hustlers.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, if it's not supposed to be comedy, what is it? So I can just work really hard on it and start helping people. Like, all right, I'm with you, dude. My life's service. I want to give, but also the way I get good at things, comedy, jujitsu, is I fucking go after it.
Yeah.
So
With
like,
focus.
just kind of standing around waiting for these signs. And I'm not standing around. I mean, I fucking work harder than most people I know, but it feels like it
Mm-hmm.
because it's not focused. It's kind of all over the place. Like, all right, well, I'm gonna teach here, I'm gonna do this podcast here, and I hope this, and like, should I keep making like jujitsu comedy videos? I guess, because like, but you know what I mean? Like, it's very hard for me to stay on task, and I feel like I'm doing a lot, but I also think if I could just focus and be like, this is the thing I'm gonna do, it would definitely be helpful. Be helpful.
Have you had this sort of existential conversation with Tim, with a guy like him?
Yeah, we actually had coffee the other day, and I mean, he's just been really supportive of the path I'm on, like super
Okay.
supportive. And him and my pastor were both very much like, dude, you're doing good and you're being hard on yourself. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Well,
And
I concur. I mean,
yeah.
that's my
And then
general feeling
uh,
throughout this whole thing.
well, and then of course I go, yeah, but how am I gonna be okay? And
Of
like,
course.
and then I feel like I go to sleep and I wake up so happy, but it takes one commercial for a Netflix Christmas rom-com to be like, I'm gonna die alone, or like one like I'm injured right now, like one injury to be like, God hates me, church isn't working. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Yeah.
still like I'm walking a fucking tightrope right now, but I'm also adding up experiences
Mm-hmm.
that are just so fucking cool that I can't actually spiral because
And
it would be
you have
I'd be a liar.
self-awareness, your level of self-awareness. Like you say you
That is
have those
that's my
moments.
superpower.
Yeah, exactly. You acknowledge those moments though, and I think that's a big difference between someone who has those moments and they continue to eat at them, right?
Yeah.
You acknowledge them, then hopefully in some capacity you exercise gratitude for whatever it
Yep.
might be in your life, and then you're back on the path and you're in the fight.
And that's like a fun piece of advice, like a tangible thing that people can do is when you do catch yourself, I don't beat myself up. I just kind of laugh and go, what are we doing here, buddy? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you talk to yourself like, come on.
Yeah.
You just
Oh, that's
had
good.
like the best weekend of your life. What are you doing? And so you can start to catch those thoughts a little quicker and then be gentle because I've said this a ton on other podcasts, whether you're trying to lose weight, whether you're trying to whatever, when you beat yourself up under the guise of I'm being hard on myself, I'm being like I'm holding myself accountable, a lot of times the way you do it, and this is how my sort of like feminine can like match your audience, which is a lot of times the way we do it, I'm David Goggins, just stay, you're just screaming, stay hard at
Stay
yourself.
hard,
Yeah.
motherfucker.
It's a lot of times that can backfire because if you're being, so we've all heard the advice, some white lady said it. So whenever I think that, I just say Brene Brown, but it might be the Eat, Pray, Love lady. would you talk to yourself the way you talk to other people?
Yeah.
And I go, no, because I would go to prison. I would be
Yeah.
fucking arrested if I talked to, my girlfriend the way I talk to me. Legit cancel, buddy. It wouldn't be good. And so, but if let's say you're on a diet, right? And you eat a piece of pizza, if you just go, God, I'm such a fucking piece of shit. Like, I can't believe I fucking did that. All right, I got to get back at it tomorrow. Just like, fuck, I shouldn't have done that. Like, so much work, blah, blah, blah. You're going to hate yourself. And when you hate yourself, what do? You do what a piece of shit will do. And
Yep.
you're going to eat more pizza soon. As opposed to if you just go, all right, well, now I know I don't feel good. And I probably shouldn't have done that. But like, you've kind of been crushing it. Let's just get back to feeling good, which means we don't do this again. And then it's still going to be a fucking process, and there's still going to be fuck ups. But yeah, that's why the tone I use now when I catch myself, it's very much like, it's what I'd do to you if we were friends. I'd be like, bud, do we think that's a good idea? And you'd be like, no.
Dude,
that's how I talk to myself
yeah.
now.
Exactly. And the analogy I like to use when I talk to people that I'm working with, whether it's like the recruiting coaching stuff I was telling you about, or if I'm helping somebody with their nutrition or whatever, it's like they'll fuck up and then they're down on themselves, like everything you were just describing. And for me, this always works. I use this analogy. I say, look, if you get a flat tire, you don't jump out of the car and fucking stab the other three. Right.
It's so good. That's so good. Yes.
You fix the flat tire
Yes.
and fucking keep moving forward. Right.
Yes.
But we have this tendency, dude. Like, we get out and we're like, well, that tire's flat. We might as well fuck these other tires up.
Yeah,
just
totally.
Like, why do we do that?
You're still going to have a little bit of a drive on the weird donut tire where like you feel unstable, but guess what's holding you up? The other three tires.
Exactly.
Right. And then it doesn't mean it's fixed right away. Like, it's wobbly. I'm on shaky ground right now, but this is easily the best fucking shaky ground. This is like, I'm on shaky ground because there's like, a volcano eruption, but I'm still like on Hawaii, which is like pretty fucking cool. Like, I'm on solid shaky ground, which is the best I've ever been on. Whereas before I seemed like I was, and this is most people, I seemed like I was on solid ground, and it was just fucking all a mirage. None of it was real. And I had to maintain like looking like I'm on, solid ground.
Yeah. That's so true, man. And the great part about this is it's something we all deal with in different ways, right? It's just human nature, man. And I think it's also powerful to realize that, because just like the self-deprecation where you think you have some unique negative aspect to your life where it's like, well, you could do that, but I couldn't. It's like, no, man, we're all just flawed, imperfect beings trying to get by on this rock hurtling through space.
That's it.
We really are, dude. And we share that. And that's why so I went down the road of sort of getting audience captured a little bit and talking about issues of, the right and the left and woke ideology, et cetera, and having some guests on who are part of that world and everything. And eventually I realized, and Dan Holloway, I credit for a lot of this.
That guy, he's my buddy.
He's awesome, dude. And
he's the best.
Citizen Podcast is basically what can we do? Like, it's great. We got all this shit we can bitch about, right? With politics and everything. But what are we doing? What are the solutions? And so making that shift in my way of thinking has been huge for me. And that's why I'm doing the Whole Man Initiative and all these things that I'm like, okay, yeah, great. There are all these problems we have. That sucks. How long am I going to bitch about it?
Exactly. And look, man, it's still, and I made the same decision, and Dan was a role model for me too. Like, I've been lucky enough to become friends with him here in Austin, and the stuff's still going to come up. This is and it happens on my podcast. We had an entire conversation about trying to better me, talk about, the old version of you who was trying to better himself, talking about bettering their audience. Somehow kid drag show still came up. Like, you still have to like address some of the stuff, but it's so different to address it, come together, move on, than just to spend, hours just being like, they're right.
Like, talk about solutions, talk about how we can change things.
And what's frustrating is, you know, we all rightfully criticize the corporate media and how they, you know, make money off of our outrage or our fear or whatever. But now I've noticed some of these independent voices that started off as the anti-corporate voices just doing a better version of the same thing,
Yep.
you know, and those have been my temptations. Like when I was getting a bigger platform on some of these shows, it's like, oh, I know, dude. If I just unloaded on the woke and I'm funnier than all of them, like, I'd be so famous. I'd be so famous. And instead, like, you know, I mean, even after the Marjorie Taylor Greene thing, I don't think I tweeted a clip. I was too nervous. And I'm so
Dude,
proud of that. I'm
do it. You
so
can still do it.
I don't know if I don't know if there were like clips of like just me and her, but like, you know, but like I am really proud of that. Like that's really cool. And that honestly, it would probably just burn bridges on both sides, but good. Like if you're burning bridges on both sides, that means you're headed in the right direction, right? And not in a like I'm just an asshole who has contrarian in my fucking Twitter bio, but like, you know, you should be pushing the envelope on both sides. But not because you're trying to piss off both sides and be like that guy, but because what you have to say is nuanced.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
like that's it's so insane that if you're nuanced or you affiliate with both sides or whatever, you're called a fucking grifter. And it's like, fuck you, man. That's just a word people use to shut you up and to try to silence you and to make you afraid to call out whatever side, you know, they don't want you calling out.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It is. It's like, I don't know. I really do. Maybe it's just the optimist in me. I feel like there are more and more of us who, if you say the things that piss off both sides, it's like this whole politically homeless movement is a thing for a reason. I
Yeah.
think that there are just so many of us who are fed up with
Well,
all of it.
I think it's not just that. I think it's the majority of people, you know, which is what I've noticed when I moved to Texas, albeit still a liberal part of Texas, or you go to jiu-jitsu gyms and you just meet people who just but they're just so checked out living their real life and being happier that
Isn't it refreshing when you meet somebody who's like, I don't know, man. I don't know about any of that. I'm just
I said that on Glenn Beck's show when you're just like talking to a normal person, they're like, I don't know who Matt Taibbi is, and you're like, oh,
like,
what's that
what?
like? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I love Matt, but you know what I mean? Yeah, so much of the shit that we're just inundated with, we don't realize is insider baseball. And then, by the way, the mainstream media, they take all these Twitter stories that are being blown up by Twitter elites, and then they report it like it is mainstream news when it's not. It's all just
Right.
what no one working at a factory cares what Elon Musk is tweeting. Sorry, nobody does, right? And
Yep.
every day there's some new Elon trending story, and it's like, who gives a fuck? We all want to take care of our families. We all want to like live a happy life. We all want to have purpose. All of that stuff. And so but I do think the problem is because a lot of these people that we're talking about in this gray area, they're not as online as the other people. That's where I start to get the misinformation that, oh, doing a podcast trying to bring people together isn't going to work. It's like, no, I actually just have to be better and louder, which stand-up would be very helpful to do, to get those people to know about your podcast, my podcast, and so on.
There might, I mean, you could figure it out, dude. You could figure out a way to still do stand up, but in a way that complements the podcast. And I mean, stand up is like one of those, it's like saying music, right? Like,
I know.
not all music is hardcore. Not all music is, you know, and
But
look, this
music,
is
like
not my world, so
no,
I
no, no,
don't
no, no.
know. But
So you're right. Like, so I have this music project coming out with it's me, one of the guys from Under Oath, and one of the dudes from Dead and Company. It's very insane. And you put me on tour with a band tomorrow, I'm in. I'm in. It's me falling into my bad, self-hating, self-destructive habits being at comedy clubs every night. There's just something different, man. And there's the same temptations on the road. You know, you hear about dudes cheating on their wives, doing drugs, whatever. But there is something to me, music to me is so like bringing people together. Whereas comedy, I just have a lot of baggage because I had Pete Holmes on the podcast, who that HBO show Crashing was about. And, you know, he was a Christian and a good old boy, and he was trying to go through a lot of the stuff I'm going through now. And I asked him, I go, how do you do comedy on the road, like being spiritual. And he goes, because there's nothing more godly than bringing a room full of strangers together in laughter. And he is correct. Like, that's why comedy is still so beautiful, and I would never trash it. But can I do that? And do I want to do that?
Right.
Like, because to me, if I'm teaching a kids class of jiu-jitsu, or even this week, me and Tim Kennedy were both, teaching a protector course. Obviously, I was just helping. And he used me to demonstrate something, and he made a joke and I got a big laugh, and I tagged that joke and I got a big laugh. And I was like, oh, well,
That
I still got to use, but not like I want to get back on stage.
right.
It was kind of the opposite.
It's like you
where
can still get that elsewhere, right?
I can
You
still use
it.
my gift. Like,
Yeah.
there were
Yeah.
people, there was a SWAT guy who came up to me and was like, dude, the way you explained that shit to me, I just fucking got it. And I think that's because of the comedian in me. The comedian in me can talk like a regular person and be funny while still getting across,
Yeah.
But I also I don't love, I love teaching people how to protect themselves more than anything, and teaching kids, but I'm not the jujitsu nerd I used to be. I'm not watching like video every night and trying to figure out like the new fucking cool move that everyone's doing. Like, I don't give a shit about that.
You're not John Donaher.
Exactly. Well, that's who I was thinking about. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not. And so, because I think a lot of people hearing this would be like, go open a gym, dummy. And I'm like,
Yeah.
eh. You know what I mean? I do love entertaining. I do love performing. I do love whatever. But yeah. Although, dude, as I'm talking about this, I was like, what if I just wrote about mental health? Or what if I don't know. There's something to that too.
You'll figure it out, brother.
I know.
I believe it. Well, look,
Thanks,
man,
brother.
we've been rocking for like 2 hours. So
I have to Joe Rogan pee. Like, I haven't had
yeah,
that kind of like in
I'm
a while.
wiggling in my chair
Yep.
for the
Yep.
same
Yep. Yep.
reason.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
tell everybody where they can find you on all the different wonderful platforms.
Oh, see, you got to make me better at business. I was literally about to be like, I love you, buddy. Bye.
I got you. Don't worry.
Yes. So the podcast is called Advice Not Taken. Great episode with Tim. You're going to do it when you come to Austin.
Yeah.
Very proud of this podcast. You can go to either jamiekilsteinpodcast.com, where there's links. There's actually full videos now, Apple, Spotify, whatever. Or if you're just a podcast person, just type in Advice Not Taken in Spotify or iTunes. If you want to follow me on social media, Twitter, I got a bigger following, but God, I'm so much happier on Instagram, and I don't know why I'm shadow banned. I have
Twitter's
no
a
fucking
dumpster
idea.
fire.
It really is. So Instagram is at the Jamie Kilstein. Please follow, comment, like, check out the podcast clips, share shit. Let's send a real fuck you to Instagram and get me on shadow banned. That would be beautiful. I said something similar to that on Glenn Beck's last week, and I got like a couple hundred new followers, and then we're still there. We're still there, guys.
And then Zuckerberg was like, no.
It's so fucking bizarre. But I hope that I bet you guys can make the difference. So that's the biggest thing. And then honestly, like, not kissing ass, but like, keep supporting shows like this. I think that it does have to do with you guys. It's easy to listen to a podcast and forget about it. I do the same thing whenever I hear people go rate and review it. It just sounds like such white noise, but it's like, you know who is doing all that stuff? The fucking divisive assholes. And like, their people are fucking on it. And so, yeah, if you care about this stuff, Dave and I talked about, it's like, hype his show, hype my show, go check out Dan's show, stuff like that. And I think that we just have to show that we're a threat, and that we have numbers, and that people respond to us. And that's how me and Dave start getting invited on these bigger shows, or, cable news or whatever, to get this message out. Right now we're kind of like building the army, which is great. But like, I think me and you want to get to the point where like, we're on bestseller lists writing about that stuff, and this stuff is popular, and like, we were at the forefront of it. I really, really believe that. So, we can't do it without your guys' support. So even if you didn't like me, go do that shit. Go do that shit for Dave.
Are you on YouTube as well? I didn't hear YouTube.
Oh yeah, so there is video. Yeah, that's new. But youtube.com/Jamie Kilstein. That's where there's full episodes of the new podcast. Yeah, I always forget that. For so long, I didn't do my podcast video. So I probably should be hyping that a lot more than I am.
Everybody go subscribe.
Yes. YouTube.com/Jamie Kilstein, JamieKilstein.
All right, dude. Well, thank you so much for your time, man. I really enjoyed this conversation, and we got to do it again.
Yeah, I love you, man. I'm gonna send you my phone number after, and we can be real friends.
Sweet.
All right, cool. Talk to you later.
All right, thanks, brother.
Bye.
Bye.